Centipede Infestation, released in 2011 for Nintendo Wii courtesy of Atari SA and WayForward, is a theoretical remake of the Atari arcade classic Centipede. In reality, Centipede Infestation is more of a twin-stick shooter similar in vein to another remake of a classic arcade title that I've played many moons ago, Robotron 64. Now I like me some Robotron 64, it's probably my favorite Nintendo 64 game ever, and so a game like Centipede Infestation should be right up my alley. And it kinda is. It also helps that because it is a twin-stick shooter type of game, Centipede Infestation is one of the Wii games compatible with a classic controller, which feels right at home for a game like this. You could also play the game with a Wii Remote and Nunchuck combination, but given the choice, I'd stick with the classic controller since it plays way better than the other method. Now, whereas Centipede was a top-down shooter where you blasted centipedes and other critters with your trackball-controlled blaster thing, Centipede Infestation has you controlling a bug hunter named Max, or other characters once you have unlocked them, and moving around a closed area shooting any bugs and critters that come your way, before eventually facing off against a centipede or two. Spanning over 30 levels of play, your main goal is to merely outlast the wave of bugs and centipedes coming at you, but some levels have you performing additional tasks such as protecting your partner, or activating switches to power up a train. In any case, your main objective remains the same, and once the level ends, you move on to the next level, so you can do the whole thing all over again in a slightly different setting. Just to make things interesting, every once in a while, there's a boss fight you have to endure, which is always fun. During fierce firefights, you'll notice these small, stationary bugs that will drop from the sky and stick around for a short while. Blast them to collect power-ups, ranging from personal shields to temporary weapon upgrades that can be stored away. You could store up to 4 weapon boosts, and collecting 2 of the same upgrades the weapon to a more effective tool of destruction. Enabling the weapon is done by pressing either the face buttons on your classic controller or the D-pad on your Wii Remote, and can be very useful in later waves, but if you take a hit, you lose a weapon. The number of hits you could take in the game depends on the difficulty setting, and once you've run out of hits, the game is over. Fortunately, Infestation saves your progress, so it's not that big of a deal. In between levels, you get these cutscenes, which are either simplistically animated sequences or these basic back and forth conversations between Max and Macy, the second player, and occasional damsel in distress to push the paper-thin story forward. These are completely skippable if you don't care for the story, and they're unlocked in the theater mode so you could go back and replay these quick little bits to catch up on some important story element that is, for the most part, completely irrelevant to the core gameplay. Regardless, it's nice to have some background to the conflict for those who are interested in that level of minutia in a video game. Centipede Infestation is fairly simple fare. Playing with the classic controller, it's essentially a twin-stick shooter where you move with the left analog stick while the right stick aims and shoots in whatever direction you move the stick in. Again, similar in vein to games like Robotron and Smash TV. Playing with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combination, you can use the remote to aim your shots while moving your player with a Nunchuck stick. I generally stick with the classic controller setup since it works better and the response time is pretty spot on, though I will say that the pointer method isn't too bad either, so you could go either way. Infestation was originally sold as a budget title, so there's not much in terms of depth. It is, for all intents and purposes, a throwback arcade twin-stick style shooting game of yesteryear and nothing too overly complex. With this in mind, this is a game that can be really simple to learn and understand as a result, since it isn't all that complex. There's even a tutorial level you could play that brings you up to speed, so you won't be completely lost if you get this without a manual or anything. It's not a particularly long game, as the levels blow by rather quickly until the last few levels, where they start throwing wave after wave of enemies at you, and it becomes a true game of endurance. An average player could probably blow through the game in about a couple hours, and there's 2 other difficulty settings for those wanting more of a challenge. You could also replay levels to try and get a higher ranking like a gold medal or something like that, which will unlock galleries and costumes and things of that nature. There is also a list of achievement-like goals you could try and clear to unlock a bit more stuff, and Centipede Infestation also has local co-op for 2 players, which is always going to be loads of fun. Centipede Infestation sports some decidedly average graphics by Wii standards. As the game is played from a fixed camera perspective, at the very least, you have a clear view of the action. The human players are adequately rendered and move about rather smoothly. They also come with a number of costumes you could unlock by attaining gold ranks, medals, whatever you want to call them. The centipede and larger boss creatures aren't too shabby looking, but the smaller bugs and grunts that you'll have to contend with in droves are the weaker of the bunch, often blending in with the somewhat muddy visuals that isn't on grass. It's not a visual spectacle to say the least, and after a while you start to grow tired of seeing the same shades of grays, browns, and beiges with occasional greens tossed in for good measure, but it does get the job done. As far as the cutscenes go, when it comes to the dialogue bits, it's not much to look at, and when it comes to the animated bits, well, it ain't much, but again, it gets the job done for what is essentially a budget title. Sadly, I didn't care much for Infestation's techno-based soundtrack, which felt generic and completely forgettable, the type of bland techno tunes that I've heard in a bunch of these sort of arcade remakes, especially those from the late 1990s. On the flip side, I thought the voice acting was alright, only a couple folks talking and delivering some admittedly quaint and hokey dialogue, but it gets the job done, and I really didn't have much of a problem with it other than the voices sounding a bit too quiet for my tastes. Even with the dialogue volume bumped up considerably in the options, they still sounded a bit soft, but whatever, it didn't kill the game outright for me. Overall, Centipede Infestation is a straightforward, no-frills shooter that might be lacking in the substance department due to its originally budget-priced range, but delivers in simple, easy-to-understand bug-blasting fun. It's not a particularly long game, and some players might find the difficulty to be a bit lacking even on the harder difficulties, which just reduce the number of hits you could take, but otherwise it's a competently done and quite frankly very enjoyable twin-stick shooting game that's fun for a lark. Obviously, you could get this game for the Wii if you still have one of those laying around, but there's also a version for the 3DS, which apparently isn't all that different save for the control method, and who knows? If the current Atari decides it needs some old remakes of its older properties to repurpose for their Atari box thing, you could do much worse than Centipede Infestation. It might not be the Centipede of old, but it's a fun little romp for killing a couple hours.